everyone, and welcome to Money Matters with Shannon Jackson. On today's show, we're preparing to pay even more for our groceries. The 2026 Canada Food Price Report was released just last month, and it does predict further increases for many food items this year. And joining me now to talk about the report in detail is Dr. Sylvain Charlebois, professor and director at the Agri-Food Analytics Lab and the former dean of the Faculty of Management. Sylvain, thank you for coming back to the show.
My pleasure.
Before we get into the meat and potatoes of your report, can you just share a little bit about your work that you do at the Agri-Food Analytics Lab?
Well, yeah, we've been busy. So we do a lot of work with industry, with government. We've worked with several provinces across the country, and of course with the federal government. We've worked with the Auditor General of Canada, the Bank of Canada, and so we try to provide advice in terms of forecasting, in terms of food policy. It can be about labeling. It can be about obviously, food inflation is a big one, especially right now, and of course we publish a lot of different papers, both scientific and professional. The Canada's Food Price Report is our flagship report, so it's released every year in December. So this year was our 16th edition, and so just to let you know, we typically get requests for interviews in September now, October, because people are expecting it. And this year was a record-breaking year. The market reach for the report was 960 million people, which means that most people in Canada would have heard of Canada's Food Price Report. So we're very proud of that. It's well read. There's a lot more to the report than just a forecast. We tackle a lot of different issues that actually makes food more expensive in general. And so this year was a fun year, I would say, compared to years before. Sometimes we don't agree on a lot of things, but this year was the consensus building, the process that led to the consensus, which is the report, was actually quite easy. So I'm really pleased about that.
Well, it's fascinating work that you do, and you're right. The report has so much information about it. It's not just statistics and numbers and forecasting. There's so much more that goes into it, and it's really interesting to have a look at that. So let's get into sort of the details of the report, because it is reporting this year another increase in our food prices between 4 to 6% for 2026. Can you go into a little bit about the food categories that are going to be increasing this year?
Yeah, so meat is, again, a big one. We're expecting meat prices to go up by as much as 7%, and we're already seeing signs that 2026 is going to be a problematic year for meat lovers, unfortunately, because beef is up, but the problem with that is that people are pivoting towards pork and chicken, and those two components of the meat trifecta are increasing in price as well, because of demand. And of course, chicken is supply managed in Canada, and because demand is up for chicken, we're not producing enough chicken. So I believe we've missed 9 cycles, because the quota system, supply management, the idea is to produce what we need. But if demand is miscalculated, anticipated demand is miscalculated, we run out of chicken. And when you run out of chicken, prices go up. And that's been the problem. People would have noticed that like a whole chicken at the grocery store that's gone up about 25%, which is really abnormal for chicken. So hopefully, we do think that things will get back to normal mid-year this year, but the impact is there already, unfortunately. And for pork, it's the same thing. Not as strong as pork, as pork is not as popular as chicken, but really we're seeing a difference. The other category we're expecting to see increases is the center of the store, pantry goods. And so the blackout, the grocer blackout, ends for February 1st. So for 3 months, suppliers aren't allowed to increase prices. with grocers, that impacts retail prices eventually. That ended on February 1st. And so we are expecting February, March, April to see higher prices at the center of the store. So dry pasta, coffee, spices, vinegars, sauces, all of these things are likely going to increase in price. And the other category are vegetables. Vegetables, we locked out in 2025, to be honest, despite the Buy Canadian movement pushing grocers to not buy American. Uh, we were expecting prices to go up, but vegetable prices went down in 2025, not up. But we are expecting like a bounce back, unfortunately, for vegetables up to 5% in 2026.
Mm. So there's a lot to sort of, unfortunately, coming down the pipe, I think, for 2026.
Yeah,
Now,
but I
with
can give you some good news if I may, because
I would love
very,
that.
very rarely people ask you, well, what's going to be cheaper? Well, there are sections where we're not expecting much movement. One, dairy. So on February 1st, typically dairy, like milk prices at farm gate, that goes up. But this year we're actually expecting no change. And so we are expecting a lot of loss leading in dairy. So products sold at a loss to get you in the door, to get you to buy other things. And so if you think of yogurt, sour cream, cottage cheese, there's a lot of demand for cottage cheese these days. So those products are likely going to be more affordable. Bakery is also a good place. We're not expecting much movement there. And frozen, again, if you're on a tight budget, you're likely visiting that aisle much more often, and we're not expecting prices to go up as much this year.
Now, with some of these increases, what does that, how does that look for the average family in terms of the average cost?
In terms of dollars, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, because I mean, 4 to 6%. What does it really mean? And people can't relate to percentages, but they can relate to dollars. And so the average family in Canada will probably spend a little over $17,000 this year to feed itself, like a family of four.
Yeah.
And that's an increase of $995 compared to last year. So now, if you're buying the perfect food basket this year compared to last year, it's an extra $995. It doesn't mean that you'll pay $995 more. It just means that the same food basket last year, well, it's an extra $995. But you can outsmart your way out of, like, you can outsmart food inflation basically. And it's just, and I think that's what we're seeing more actually. A lot of Canadians are starting to strategize a lot more, and because we've been in this food inflation storm for a while now, and people are starting to adopt new habits. So, and that smartness, if you will, is also influencing prices. So the smarter we get as shoppers, the more pressure we put on grocers to, give us good deals.
You're absolutely right. And so you mentioned this is the 16th year that the food report has been published. Viewers are going to be a little bit curious. How accurate have you been in these reports previously?
Yeah, actually, so we're academics, so our job is to make sure that our methodology is as good as it can be, and we do change our methodology pretty much every single year. We change our sampling. Our data set actually gets tweaked a little bit because we get data from all over the world to predict Canadian food prices. But in the last over 15 years, so I have to exclude number 16 here because we're not done with 2026, obviously. So over the last 15 years, we've missed our mark twice out of 15 years. And if you look at all of our reports, the first chapter of every report is always entitled, "How did we do?"
Mm.
So we're very honest and transparent. Now, this is the overall forecast for all categories combined. So we're a good 13 out of 15 years. We were good, but if you start digging into all of the categories, our accuracy is much lower, I must say. But there are two categories we've never missed ever: restaurants, food service, and bakery. We've never missed those two.
So I mean, you're obviously, like you mentioned, you're academics. You're digging into everything, all the different factors that are going into what is influencing our food prices. So I kind of want to dig into some of those external factors that we're experiencing right now. And I think the one that's on the forefront of everyone's mind is our trade issues with the US. Can you sort of
Yes.
talk about how that's been influencing our food industry?
Yeah, absolutely. So 2025 was a complicated year, there's no doubt, because not necessarily, I mean, I'd say yes, Washington really made things difficult, but it's Ottawa's reaction that actually made things more expensive for us with counter tariffs. Only two countries in the world actually responded to America with counter tariffs. That's China and Canada. Everyone else didn't. And so, because they didn't want to make their food more expensive for their own citizens. When former Prime Minister Trudeau decided to implement counter tariffs, I thought it was just an awful idea because it's not going to impact America. It's only going to impact Canada. But the interesting thing is that I actually believe that Canadians didn't know what tariffs were
Mm.
10 months ago. Now they know. They know that if you implement counter tariffs, it hurts. It's a tax on us, not on America. And Americans are starting to get that too. If you look at surveys in the United States, you can see that Americans are starting to get it. And so when Prime Minister Carney actually was elected into power, he knew, he's an economist, he knew that it was bad policy, and he got rid of all counter tariffs on September 1st, which was really a good idea.
Mm.
And now
And
we're going into 2026, and I see no evidence whatsoever on both sides of the border that both administration actually do want to apply tariffs or counter tariffs on affecting food. I think even Donald Trump actually is actually eliminated all tariffs on food for Americans. That was in November or early December. So you can tell that like applying tariffs on low margin products, perishable products, that's not a good idea. On tanks and t-shirts and drugs, maybe, but food is just different.
well, and food, like you mentioned, it's affects everybody, and that affordability issue is is really on the forefront of everyone's mind,
Yeah,
really across the country. And we're going to get into that in our second segment here, but I mean, just thinking about how our countries can hopefully work together to make it just a little bit easier for the everyday person
yeah,
to just be able to put food on the table, I think is so important. So I
absolutely.
agree with what you're saying there. And we're going to get into that affordability problem that I think a lot of people are really concerned about in our second segment because um, it's leading to, unfortunately, a lot of food insecurity and a lot of reliance on outside sources like food banks and things like that. And we're going to get into those details, of course, after the break when Money Matters returns. Welcome back to Money Matters with Shannon Jackson. My guest today is Dr. Sylvain Charlebois, professor and director at the Agri-Food Analytics Lab and the former dean of the Faculty of Management. And we're talking about the annual Canada Food Price Report. And according to this 16th annual report, consumers should prepare for a little bit further sticker shock as they walk down the aisles of their grocery store this year, because the report does predict that costs can go up between 4 to 6% this year. Now, as we were talking about before the break, Sylvain, it's hard to believe, like, when you consider the price increases that we've already seen over recent years. I mean, your report mentions that our prices have increased 27% just compared to 5 years ago.
Mm.
That's a huge increase, unfortunately, and is putting a lot of pressure on a lot of Canadian families.
Yes, absolutely. I think the discourse around food inflation is slowly changing in Canada right now. I mean, for a few years, people uh, pointed at cyclical, temporary factors like climate change, and of course, greed, profiteering, those kinds of things. We're still hearing some of that, but what I'm finding, I was actually talking to a reporter from Bloomberg, New York yesterday, and he's observing the same thing. People are starting to wonder what is going on in Canada, because Canada is a unique case within the G7, and our food inflation problem. They're not new. Our problems are not new, really. If you go back into the data, really our problems started in 2008 during the
Mm.
economic crisis, the very significant financial crisis of 2008. If you look at the CPI, so the cost of living, inflation, and food inflation, that index, you're starting to see a decoupling in 2008, and we've never recovered. And so it started really under Prime Minister Harper, but things got much worse under Prime Minister Trudeau. So that delta between the two has only increased since, with, frankly, mostly bad policy. So instead of telling us, convincing ourselves, oh, it's temporary, it's because of climate change, or grocers are just gouging us, the problem is much deeper than that. And right now, people are starting to ask real fundamental questions about what is actually going on in Canada versus other countries. Because when you look at the U.S., both lines have followed each other. They've actually gone through COVID, Ukraine, all of the things that we've seen in recent years that could impact food prices. You see bumps here and there, but they go back together again. So it's totally reasonable to see food prices go up at the same pace as everything else in the economy. But when food prices are increasing at a much faster rate than everything else, when people go to the grocery store and are sticker shocked, it's not their imagination.
Mm.
It's actually, so whenever a Canadian goes into a grocery store, when they see higher prices, it's not their imagination. It's the data is actually telling us that.
Well, and speaking of data, the latest information from Stats Canada says that 10 million Canadians, including 2.5 million children, are living in food insecure households right now. I mean, 10 million Canadians, that's a quarter of our population of the
Yep.
whole country.
Yep. Absolutely. And I mean, you're well versed in this uh, to understand that really household debt is a big problem. We carry a lot of debt. And so when interest rates go up, that's a problem for a lot of people. And so right now, what's driving those numbers that you just mentioned is the working poor.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of people going to food banks or experiencing food insecurity, and they're working.
Yeah.
So they're just on a treadmill. They're on a treadmill, and they're wondering how can they get off, and that's a big problem. It's demotivating, and so that's why we're seeing a lot of crime, a lot of theft, unfortunately, in Canada. And
Mm.
so the only way to get out is basically to recognize some of our fundamental problems and create wealth in this country. And both we haven't done properly.
Mm. Now, for those who are struggling with, like you mentioned, they have perhaps unmanageable debt, they're working, but there's just not enough coming in to be able to sustain sort of our regular living expenses. Now, I think that's causing consumers to maybe change their behaviors a little bit. Maybe they're skipping meals, which I feel is a little bit concerning. What do you think about that strategy?
I'd say, I mean, if there's merit, certainly there for sure. That people, I mean, I think we're in a different place now than a few years ago. People understand what they have to work with. They gather more information. They do their homework. So when they show up at the grocery store, they're well informed. In fact, I'm sure when you go to a grocery store, you notice a lot of people with their phones constantly, looking in real time some of the products that would be sold elsewhere, or at least understand how much carrots should be priced at and how much beef should be priced at. And so people are aware. When we started the food price report 15, 16 years ago, let's be honest here. Most people weren't looking at prices as they are today. And I was always asking people, how much is milk these days? And how much is our apples? Now today, people are much more aware, and I can see it on social media. I'm dealing with, I have 65,000 followers, and I must say, I'm getting questions that are much more detailed, much more precise than 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Because just like you say, our shopping behaviors have shifted. And so can you sort of
Yeah.
talk about how this has shifted, how this can maybe affect the food retail side of things?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So the average Canadian went to the grocery store about 5.3 times a month before COVID. Okay, so a little over a week, one time a week. And now it's about 7.5%. Now, are they going more often to the same store? No. They've just expanded their portfolio of stores, basically. So they'll go to a discount store, they'll go to a regular store, they'll go to a specialty store, Costco. So they're hedging. They're looking around. So that has changed quite a bit, dramatically, in fact. And so that's one thing. The other thing that has changed is the use of loyalty programs. They've all grocers have actually ramped up their loyalty programs because they know loyalty no longer exists in Canada, which is a good thing, to be honest, for us consumers. Because if we're too loyal, then we're at the mercy. A lot of people are complaining about the oligopoly that we have in the grocery business. As long as you don't remain too loyal, that oligopoly can only do so much. And so we're seeing the rise in some markets of independents, for example, that are working with the supply chain very differently because of a different consumer. So, for example, I'm seeing a lot of liquidation centers that are actually capturing products that are rejected by the large grocers because those products are not in compliance with specs, very strict specs. Apples need to be perfect. Tomatoes have to be perfect. All those cans have to be perfect. A little dent on a can doesn't really compromise the safety of a product, but some liquidators will actually get that. I've actually seen liquidators selling jugs of Greek yogurt at 88 cents. Yeah,
Wow.
and people are noticing. So there was a liquidation center that opened up in Quebec, just south of Montreal. It was but just before Christmas, and there was 500 people waiting in line for the opening. It was like Boxing Day, but for food.
Wow.
So there are more of these companies emerging. So when people say, oh, we need more competition, well, we kind of have more competition. Really, it's just we're not seeing it. We're not seeing major chains.
And having that increase in variety, it sounds like gives us a little bit a better advantage. We
I think so.
can
Yeah.
we can find the products that we need at hopefully, reduced costs, whether if we break our loyalty, like you say.
Yeah, no, I think so, and people are aware of the power that they have as consumers. I think in 2022, um, I felt that food inflation came violently into our lives, and a lot of people weren't ready, and they were just suffocating with a food inflation rate at 11%. You're suffocating if you're not ready. And that's exactly what happened. And people immediately, the knee-jerk reaction was, grocers are gouging us. How dare you? That was the reaction. And to me, it never made sense to me. I don't know why people thought of that. They probably thought of that because for them, the food industry is basically stops at the grocery store.
Yeah.
Food appears magically on shelves, but we both know that's not true. Supply chains are exposed. There are dynamic systems. A lot of things can actually happen impacting food prices. So when you look at Canada's food price report, we look at 45 different factors that can impact food prices from farm gate to store. So yes, grocers set prices, but they're influenced by a huge number of factors, and that's often underappreciated. But then consumers know that, and I think they're starting to appreciate that, which is why many consumers are starting to approach grocery shopping very differently.
Just with the last couple of minutes that we have, any sort of tips and tricks for our consumers other than shopping at the discount stores and things like that? Are there any other tricks that they can do to just help reduce that grocery bill?
Well, take Ozempic, you'll eat less. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Although actually it's a big factor right now. I mean, 2 million Canadians, we believe 2 million Canadians are actually taking Ozempic or Wegovy, a weight loss medication, only to lose weight basically. And that's impacting, we have noticed people are spending less on food, but joke aside, of course, I would say, I mean, it's important to understand that a lot of things can't change every week. And it's going to get more complicated out there because of AI, because of dynamic pricing. I actually do think that more and more grocers will actually adopt different technologies, and you have to keep updated. And there's lots of apps. There's tons of apps helping you to save as much as possible. So get on it. I'm thinking of Food Hero, Flash Food, Too Good To Go. Those are all apps that can give you some huge discounts. And we're talking 70, 60, 70%. Who wouldn't want that? So take advantage of all those technologies as much as possible.
Well, Sylvain, thank you so much for taking the time to be here. Really good information, a great discussion. I really appreciate it. If anyone wants to have a look at the Canada Food Price Report, where can they find that?
Well, I can just Google it, I guess, or go on our website, the Dalhousie Agri-Food Analytics Lab website, and you'll find all of our reports, and they're available in both English and French.
Thank you again so much for being here. I really appreciate all of your information, and I want to thank you, our viewers, for watching. Until next time, I'm Shannon Jackson.